We now move on to part 3 of the story of the man born blind in the Gospel of St. John, chapter 9, verses 1 to 41. Now, in this final lesson, I want to draw 5 very important lessons that we can learn from this story. Now, if you haven't seen the first 2 parts yet, I invite you to please go back and watch them in order, part 1, part 2, and then this one being part 3, because they'll all make sense together. Trust me. The lessons we draw from the story of the man born blind is so beautiful. There's so many lessons, but I want to just give you 5 important takeaways from this lesson in particular. And before we go from the point 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I want to make this point very clear. I want you to imagine the last time you had an argument with someone. It can be your spouse. It can be a brother, a sister, maybe your children, for example, right? And in that argument, you insist you're right, and they insist they're right. Who's right and who's wrong? And let me go even deeper and ask you, what if in this argument, you are wrong and they are right? Do you have the humility to be able to admit that you are wrong, to admit that you're at fault and that you need to change ways? Do you have that humility? That point right there is very important for drawing all 5 of this lesson right here in this story of the man born blind. Now, before we continue on, please be sure to subscribe if you haven't already yet, so you get weekly reflections and weekly lessons on faith. Okay, so 5 main points. Point number 5. We walk by faith and not by sight. This is what St. Paul wrote in the letter to the Corinthians. He taught them that. Now imagine if our senses fail, if we cannot see one day, right? What do we rely on? We rely on our faith. Note the reference between darkness and light. And as I share with you already too, right? For the time of Jesus, they only have light or darkness. Those are the only 2 things, right? Day and night. And so you see the contrast here, that's important. So for your eyes, in order for you to see, you must turn to Jesus, who is the light. Let the light of Christ shine into your eyes and into your heart so that you can see and that you can walk by faith. That's point number 5. Now, point number 4, there is a difference between physical blindness and spiritual blindness. Again, physical blindness, if you want to experience it, just close your eyes, completely close your eyes, right? You can't see, you're blind. But spiritual blindness, now this is important. You know, in our world today, we have the phrase, seeing is believing. But seeing is not everything. Remember that. So what we see on the outside, for example, can be on the outside, but we can't necessarily see what's on the inside. That's important too. So seeing help, obviously, yes. But also we have to verify, right? We also make sure that all the evidence lines up. That's why there's also another phrase that says, trust but verify. And when you verify and you see all the evidence is pointing to a certain way, make sure you at least be open, right? Be open. Otherwise, you're spiritually blind as well, right? You refuse. Point number 3, right? This is third lesson. Lesson number 3 is do not equate sin with disability or deformity, right? And I think this is a very important lesson and a very important takeaway as well too. At the beginning of the gospel, remember the disciples asked Jesus, well, who sinned? Did this blind man sin or did his parents sin? Right? This is very, very important, right? And Jesus says, neither. If we think this way, if we think because someone has a physical deformity or because they did something bad, that they were sinners, that's not the way to think, right? And if we think that way, we need to change our attitude, right? Jesus makes it clear it's neither. It's for God's greater glory. So again, sin does not equate to disability or deformity. If you think this way, it's superstition, nothing more, right? Now, point number 2, remember I'm going backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2. Point number 2 now is no one knows the mind of God except God, right? God is so much greater than us. He is beyond our understanding. Yet we make up rules and say, well, God, you have to fit these criteria of mine. You have to fit these guidelines of mine. Otherwise, it can't happen. Take a look at the Pharisees. They use human laws to judge God, right? Isn't that ironic? Isn't that strange, right? Or maybe for you to relate even closer, say, for example, you don't believe in miracles. Say, oh, no, that can't be. It has to fall into the line of human reasoning. But remember, God is so much greater than us. But even going into a deeper point, I want to make this clear. God can also work through sinners, right? So if we say the blind man is considered a sinner, which is not the case at all, right? But take a look at other gospel stories. God can work through anybody. God can work through sinners. God can bring those who are deformed, those who have disability, to his greater glory, right? God can make the blind man even see. If the Pharisees open their heart and their eyes, they will see. So point number 2, right? This is the lesson number 2. We're going backwards, remember, is no one knows the mind of God except God. And then now, finally, for lesson number 1. Right? The most important of the 5 lessons, which I want to share with you right here. Are you ready? Can you guess what it is? Do not be closed-minded. Do not be closed-minded. Right? That's what happened to the Pharisees. They refused to believe. They refused and refused and refused and refused to believe. And no matter what, they will not believe. They are insistent that they are right. That no matter what happens, they're always right and they will be right. But you know what? St. John the Evangelist makes it very clear to us, they are wrong. And they refuse to accept the fact that they are wrong. Which is why I asked the question at the very beginning of this video. Think about it. Do you know somebody like this? Where you have an argument with them and they always insist they're right and there can never be wrong? Well, that's always a problem. You see, when you're closed-minded, you cannot accept the truth. This is the worst attitude to have. Imagine if the Pharisees have understanding and humility, right? The man born blind explained it to them many times. His parents even testify, but they refused to see. They refused to see. If they did have the humility, if they did have the understanding, then they will see. You see the irony? It's very interesting, right? So there you have it, 5 lessons on the story of the man born blind. Thank you for watching this series, and please stay tuned, subscribe, and get more weekly lessons on faith and also reflections on the scripture series. Thank you, and God bless you.